Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a former real estate lawyer seeks peace on his vineyard estate, a power-hungry HOA declares war. What begins with a parking violation spirals into trespassing, sabotage, and legal firestorms. He left the courtroom behind until the courtroom came for his land. The fog was still lifting over the vineyard when I stepped outside with my coffee and spotted the bright orange sticker slapped on the windshield of my brand new Ram 2500. Tow notice: remove vehicle immediately. I blinked once, twice. Then I took a slow sip, because even rage deserved good coffee. The truck was parked at the top of my private drive, a wide gravel loop between my farmhouse and the wine processing barn. I had laid every inch of it myself 4 years ago, when I quit practicing real estate law in Portland and decided peace looked like 8 acres and 1,000 grapevines in Willamette Valley. There wasn't a single square foot of this property that wasn't mine, and I knew that down to the coordinates, which meant someone had made a very, very stupid mistake. I didn't have to guess long who it was. Taped below the sticker was a folded letter, printed in Comic Sans of all things, with the proud seal of the Wisteria Pines Homeowners Association. My eyes rolled before I finished reading the first line. Mr. Calloway, your vehicle is in direct violation of Community Appearance Regulations, Section 4.2b. HOA rules prohibit long-term parking of commercial-sized vehicles in public view. Remove the vehicle within 24 hours or risk tow at owner's expense. Signed, of course, by Karen Westmore, HOA president and part-time tyrant. I snorted. Wisteria Pines began half a block downhill. My property was not, had never been, and would never be part of their coven. Years ago, I'd even added a boundary line overlay to my title deed, just in case someone got ambitious. I hadn't expected they'd get stupid instead. By noon, I had scanned my deed, highlighted the property perimeter, and sent an email response with the following note. To whom it may concern, Ms. Westmore, kindly review the attached property survey, tax assessment, and plat map from the County Assessor's Office. I am not under the jurisdiction of Wisteria Pines HOA. This is private property. Attempting to enforce non-applicable rules may constitute harassment. For good measure, I CC'd the HOA's general inbox and the county clerk. Just a little reminder that I still remembered how to draft letters that made bureaucrats sweat. I figured that would be the end of it. I figured wrong. 2 days later, I caught movement out my front window and saw a tow truck backing up my driveway. My truck was already hooked. The driver didn't even flinch when I stormed out, barefoot and furious, still holding half a sandwich. Sir, I've got an order to remove this vehicle, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Got a copy of that order? I asked. No ma'am, sir. They just called it in. I swear to God, if you move that truck 1 inch, I will personally sue you and the company that employs you for unlawful trespass, property damage, and theft. I'm not bluffing, and I'm not poor. He paused, looked at me, looked at the truck, then said, yeah, you seem like you'd follow through, and unhooked it. I took photos of everything, the tow truck plates, the hook on my bumper, the truck's company name. I sent another email. This one wasn't polite. Then I stood at the edge of my property, staring downhill at the HOA clubhouse just barely visible through the trees, and realized something. They thought this was a game, but they were playing on my land. The next morning, a flyer was taped to my mailbox. Not folded, not subtle. Bold red letters screamed across the top. Urgent community notice. Safety risk. Below was a photo of my truck parked neatly on my driveway, but with the image darkened and zoomed in, as if it were part of some crime bulletin. The caption: unapproved vehicle presents visibility and safety hazard to HOA children during events. I nearly choked on my apple. Wisteria Pines was a community of oversized flower beds and wine moms who jogged half a mile, then posted about it for 3. There hadn't been an event involving children on my property since I'd let them host their Easter brunch in my field last spring. And I only did that because someone guilt-tripped me with a fundraiser basket of lemon bars. I balled up the flyer and tossed it in the compost. But by noon, I realized this wasn't an isolated attack. 3 more flyers showed up on the fence at the end of my drive. Then someone posted a PDF of the same notice on the website for Wisteria Pines. Someone had taken the time to label my property as Adjacent Risk Zone and marked my driveway with a big red X. They were turning this into a smear campaign. That night, I heard voices near the lower part of the field, my field, the one I'd always let them use informally for weekend markets and bake sales. I walked down with a flashlight and caught a group of HOA board members measuring the edge of the land with a goddamn surveyor's wheel. Karen stood in the middle, clipboard in hand. I cleared my throat. No one flinched. Karen turned slowly, squinting like I was the one trespassing. "Evening," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We're just evaluating the safety perimeter," she said, all sweet poison. "We've had several parents raise concerns. Your vehicle is making it difficult to use the emergency fire lane." "There is no fire lane," I replied. "Well, that's exactly what we're petitioning the county to correct." She smiled. I stared at her, unblinking. "On whose land?" She didn't answer. By Friday, a Change.org petition appeared online titled "Restore Community Access to Shared Safety Corridor." Someone had uploaded photos of past HOA events on my land, conveniently cropped to make it look like a public park. The petition called me a recent threat to neighborhood cooperation and urged the county to act before tragedy strikes. I was livid. That weekend, I found 6 signatures stuffed in my mailbox, addressed to the owner of the event lot, demanding that I return the land to community use. That did it. I stopped being polite. The next Monday, I brought in a contractor and installed a 10-foot wrought iron gate across my driveway, complete with keypad access and a no trespassing sign in case someone suddenly forgot how property rights worked. I rerouted the power line that fed the outlet box HOA had begged me to install years ago, the one they used for sound systems during their summer fair. And then I sent a final formal notice. Effective immediately, any and all events, passage, or gatherings on my property are prohibited. Any further attempts will be considered criminal trespass and prosecuted accordingly. 2 days later, Karen was pacing on the shoulder of the road outside the gate with a megaphone. "This land was entrusted to the community," she barked. "He's trying to privatize what always belonged to the people." I watched from the porch with a glass of Cabernet and the same energy I used to watch courtroom implosions from the opposing counsel. My only regret was not popping popcorn, but then she screamed something that made my jaw tighten. This land was always ours. He just temporarily thought he owned it. That wasn't just provocation. That was a declaration. And I knew then. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday. I'd planned to spend it bottling a limited batch of Pinot Noir Reserve and pretending the HOA didn't exist. But instead, I got a frantic call from my part-time field manager, Claire, around 11 in the morning. She was breathless. "Andrew, you need to get back here now. They're on your field." I blinked. "Who's on my what?" "I think it's the HOA people. There are tents going up, food trucks, music." My blood ran cold. I was 30 minutes away in McMinnville picking up oak barrel samples. I turned that truck around so fast I nearly rolled a stop sign. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They had broken in. My brand new gates were wide open, not cut, not smashed, just unlocked. Someone had clearly brute forced the keypad casing. Across the open field, which just last week had been a trimmed and quiet plot between the vines and the tree line, now stood 3-party tents, 2 bounce houses, a DJ table, and a taco truck idling with its vents hissing. People milled about like this was their damn county fair. Children chased balloons across my irrigation lines. Someone had plugged extension cords into an illegal splitter. I recognized it from a long-retired HOA box that was supposed to be defunct. And near the west fence, a minivan had backed onto my grass to unload folding chairs. And standing dead center in the chaos, Karen Westmore in a fuchsia sun hat, giving directions like the queen of trespassing. I didn't even make it halfway across the field before I saw what they'd done to the main irrigation pipe. Someone had rolled a food truck over it. One tire sank into the trenching. Water seeped into the ground, dark and silent, draining out faster than I could fix without shutting the whole system down. I called the police. The dispatcher took my name, my address, and the description of what was happening. She put me on hold. 2 minutes later, she returned. "Sir, are you sure this is not a permitted community event?" "No," I said, voice sharp. "It's on my private property without any permission." "We have an officer en route," she said. 10 minutes later, a patrol SUV rolled up, lights off. Out stepped Officer Ryan Mears, whose daughter I remembered with grim clarity had performed a flute solo at last year's HOA Fall Festival on my field. He gave me a bland nod. "Afternoon, Mr. Calloway." What's the issue? I stared at him. They broke into my gate. They're trespassing. There's property damage. That irrigation system is part of my vineyard operation, and now it's compromised. He scratched his chin like he was contemplating a grocery list. Well, I don't see any signs of forced entry. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. And it's a community event. Can't you just let it wrap up? Ryan, I said flatly, if I walked into your backyard and set up a damn taco truck, would you let me wrap up? He didn't answer. I want a report filed. Now. He sighed, pulled out a small pad, and began writing. But I could tell he wasn't going to push it. Not against his golf buddies and bake sale pals. After he left, I took photos of everything. The damage to the irrigation pipe, the tire tracks, the mess, the goddamn portable toilets they'd dragged onto my soil. And I waited. Waited until the music died down, the last SUV rolled away, and Karen finally waddled back toward the entrance, smug and pink as a champagne pig. She gave me a little wave as she passed. Lovely day, isn't it? I didn't say a word, but that night I got out the original plat maps from the county surveyor's office, and then I called a friend who owed me a favor. This wasn't just about a party anymore. They wanted war. They just officially got it. By Monday morning, I was done playing host. I emailed the county assessor's office at 6:15 a.m. requesting the latest parcel boundary confirmation for my property, tax lot 725A, and included historical maps for good measure. By noon, they confirmed what I already knew. My driveway, my open field, and the entire area used for that community event were all part of my privately owned 8 acres. No easements, no rights of way. Period. I forwarded that email to Karen, CCing the HOA legal inbox. I knew they had one. I'd seen it printed on one of their ridiculous bake sale permits. Then I got to work. First, I called my old friend Mark Brenner, a civil litigator who now specialized in property disputes. I laid it all out. The flyers, the gate tampering, the unauthorized event, the damage to my irrigation system, the non-response from local law enforcement. Mark didn't even blink. I've sued HOAs for less, he said. Let's start with a cease and desist, and then we file for injunctive relief. And we'll loop in your insurance for the irrigation damage. You still with State Farm Commercial? Yep, I said. They're already waiting on pictures. By Tuesday afternoon, a courier delivered a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA mailbox, printed on thick ivory stock for that extra sting. Another copy went directly to Karen's front porch. But that was only the start. I also submitted an official property damage claim to my insurer for the burst irrigation trench and compressed vine rows. The estimate came back fast, $400 in damages. I didn't inflate the numbers. I didn't have to. The tire tracks told their own story. I attached time-stamped photos, a map of the impacted rows, and my foreman's statement. Then came the fun part. I pulled public meeting notes from the county council's online database. There it was, under a zoning review item. Application submitted for designation of temporary community access corridor along agricultural property bordering HOA, submitted by none other than Wisteria Pines HOA Committee on Safety. I downloaded every document attached. The application included a map, a clearly doctored one, showing my property lines mysteriously trimmed down to make room for a hypothetical shared use lane. I printed it, compared it to the county's actual plat records, and highlighted the discrepancies in red ink, like it was a law school exam. Then I drafted a letter to the planning commissioner attaching proof of fraud and requested an immediate revocation of the application and an investigation into its origin. 3 days later, I got a reply. The commissioner thanked me for bringing the matter to their attention and confirmed that the corridor application had been put on administrative hold pending further review. A polite way of saying someone got caught with their hand in the map. Jar. Karen didn't say a word all week, but I knew silence wasn't surrender. Friday morning, a letter arrived, hand-delivered, no stamp, just a HOA envelope shoved into the gate's intercom slot. Inside was a 2-page list of community concerns, outlining how my sudden hostility was damaging the spirit of Wisteria Pines. It accused me of being uncooperative, disruptive, and my favorite, a threat to neighborhood harmony. They even cited an obscure local ordinance about preserving aesthetic continuity in high-visibility residential corridors, complete with a photo of my truck, again. That night, I walked the edge of my field with a flashlight and my dog, Scout, just making sure nothing had been tampered with. And that's when I noticed the new sign someone had zip-tied to my eastern fence post. "This land belongs to the community. Return it or we will." It wasn't vandalism. It was a message. And messages like that meant one thing. They weren't backing down. But neither was I. It was Sunday when I decided I'd had enough of passive defense. I spent the morning walking my property perimeter with a clipboard, measuring wheel and a red Sharpie, marking every inch of fencing, noting where boundary stakes were buried, and documenting anything even remotely suspicious. Scout trotted along beside me, ears perked, occasionally stopping to sniff at places where the grass had been unnaturally flattened. Someone had been there recently. By midday, I had a plan. First, I called in a contractor from Salem who specialized in automated fencing systems. I wanted industrial-grade steel gates, 12 feet tall, reinforced posts, full electric lock, and keypad entry. No HOA guest was getting through again. The crew would start Monday morning. I also installed a wireless camera system, full perimeter coverage, night vision, motion alerts straight to my phone. If anyone even breathed near my property line again, I'd know. But the real statement? That was the letter I dropped off at HOA headquarters that afternoon, a single-story stucco building near the club pool where Karen had her little boardroom. I printed it in bold Times New Roman, no legalese, just plain righteous English. As of today, all permissions for use of my private property by Wisteria Pines Homeowners Association or any of its members are permanently revoked. Any future events held on my land without signed contractual agreement will be considered trespassing. Unauthorized access will result in prosecution. And then I shut off the auxiliary power lines that once ran from my shed to the open field. I'd let them tap in years ago when I was being friendly. That ended now. I flipped the switch, and the entire east quadrant of their event prep shed went dark. I imagined Karen trying to make her frozen lemonade mix in the dark and chuckled. By Tuesday, the gates were installed, shiny, imposing, impossible to miss. A large wooden sign hung across the center, freshly painted in deep red. Private property, not affiliated with Wisteria Pines HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of my best Syrah, watching the sun dip below the hills. It was peaceful until I heard tires on gravel. A convoy of HOA board members was parked outside the new gates. Karen stood in front, arms crossed over her floral cardigan, flanked by her little court of clipboard warriors. One of them was filming me with her phone, as if this were some kind of protest. Karen shouted up the drive like a medieval tax collector. "Andrew, this is outrageous. These gates are an act of hostility. You're escalating this situation unnecessarily." I didn't move from my chair. "I warned you," I called back. "This is private land. You abused the privilege. Now it's over. You're creating division in this community," she snapped. "This field was always shared." I stood slowly, glass in hand. "No, it was mine. You just mistook kindness for weakness," she glared. Her lip curled like she was about to spit. "We're going to take this to the county. We'll see what the law says." "Please do," I said, raising the wine glass. "You're going to need a real lawyer." They stood there another 10 minutes, muttering among themselves before peeling out in their Lexus parade. 2 hours later, someone sprayed "Land Hog" in orange paint across the outer side of my western fence. It was sloppily done, and the spray paint was cheap. It started peeling by the next morning, but that wasn't the point. They were testing me. Again. Problem was, I didn't bluff, and now it was my turn to go on offense. I didn't sleep much that night, not from fear, from adrenaline. I lay in bed, running through legal scenarios in my head like I was back in litigation. Nuisance claims, civil trespass, property line disputes. I knew the angles, and I knew how far HOAs were willing to go when they thought no one would push back. By sunrise, I had a folder labeled Wisteria Evidence open on my laptop, and it was filling fast. That afternoon, I had a surveyor on site. A real one, not some HOA volunteer with a tape measure. Licensed, insured, and equipped with a high-precision GPS rig. We remeasured the full 8-acre property line, documented every stake, and recorded exact coordinates. Every inch of my field, driveway, and the border with the clubhouse lawn was clearly within my parcel. I paid extra to have him notarize the results and include a drone sweep with overhead video. While he worked, I walked the perimeter and picked up another laminated flyer left by the HOA. Join us this weekend for our annual spring celebration. Except this time, they'd drawn the boundary right through my property, marked Community Lawn. It was laughable. My dog Scout actually peed on it. Fitting. That evening, I filed an official trespass warning with the County Sheriff's Department. It named Karen Westmore and the entire HOA board. I also emailed a digital copy to their legal inbox and copied my insurance agent and my attorney Mark Brenner. The subject line read, Formal Trespass Warning, 425 Delridge Valley Road. By Friday, I received a polite call from the zoning officer at the county office. He had reviewed the documents I'd submitted last week. The forged application, the altered maps, the false claim for a shared access corridor. His tone was quiet but firm. "We flagged the HOA's application as irregular," he said, "and we're forwarding the materials to the county prosecutor. There are indicators of fraud." "Glad to hear it," I said. "Let me know if you need sworn affidavits. I've got photos, satellite overlays, and the original deeds from the 90s. He chuckled. "You're more organized than our staff." That same day, I got a knock at the door. It was my neighbor Greg, one of the few decent people in Wisteria Pines. Retired teacher, honest guy. "Andrew, just so you know," he said, nervously glancing back toward the road, "Karen's been going door to door all week, saying you're trying to destroy the community. She claims you're planning to build a wall around your land with razor wire and that you're suing to shut down the HOA entirely." I laughed. They wish I was that unhinged. But then he added, "She's also telling folks you were never the real owner, that the original deeds were faulty." That was when something clicked. They weren't just trying to regain access. They were laying the groundwork for a challenge to ownership. That's why the altered maps, the community signage, the fake flyers, they were constructing a narrative. And that meant I had to move faster. I called Mark. "We're filing Monday," I said. "Civil suit, multiple counts, defamation, trespass, willful property damage, and attempted conversion." "You sure?" he asked. "Once we file, they're going to panic." "Good," I said. "Let them panic." That night, I stood in my field, now silent, closed off, reclaimed. The floodlights I'd installed blinked on at dusk. In the distance, I saw shadows move along the HOA's clubhouse path, people coming and going, keeping their distance from the fence line. And I realized something important. This wasn't just about a field or a driveway. It was about control. And I wasn't giving up a damn inch of it. Monday morning didn't start with the sunrise. It started with the sound of power tools. I woke up at 6:30 to the unmistakable whine of a portable generator and the dull rhythm of hammering coming from somewhere near the eastern edge of my property. I threw on jeans and boots and stormed out with Scout at my heels. The dog was already growling. And then I saw them, 2 tents, a folding table, 3 men unloading extension cords and buckets from a trailer parked partially across my fence line, and smack in the middle of my field, a half-erected archway made of white PVC pipe wrapped in synthetic flowers. I didn't even need to ask. I marched straight over, phone in hand, already recording. "Turn it off, all of it. Now." One of the workers, maybe in his 20s, looked up mid-drill. "We're setting up for the HOA. They said this area was reserved." "It's not. It's private property." He blinked. "They gave us a map. Said you were out of town." "I'm very much in town," I said, raising the phone to eye level. "And I strongly suggest you get off my land before you add trespassing to your invoice." He hesitated, then waved to his crew. "Pack it up, guys." I watched them leave, filmed the trailer pulling out, and then walked the site. The archway had torn up my irrigation line again. The tire marks crossed directly into the edge of my grape rows. The sheer arrogance of it all lit a fuse in my chest. I didn't go back inside. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. This time, I filed a criminal complaint. Not civil, criminal. I handed them video, timestamps, the survey, everything. The deputy, not the one who brushed me off before, took it seriously. He said he'd follow up, especially with the county already looking into the falsified documents. But the real surprise came that evening. I returned home to find a crowd gathered just outside the gates. No signs, no yelling, just a knot of confused neighbors. Some I recognized, some I didn't. They stared at the new sign I'd added that morning. Private event space. No HOA access. By invitation only. It wasn't a bluff. I had decided to flip the script. 2 days earlier, I'd reached out to a few local businesses and nonprofits, folks I'd worked with during my law career, the Cancer Walk, a veterans fundraiser. a farm-to-table group from Eugene. All of them were thrilled at the idea of using a scenic vineyard location for legitimate events, with actual contracts, insurance, and, most importantly, consent. I printed glossy flyers and posted them on public boards around town. One of them ended up taped to the gate. Karen saw it. She pulled up that evening in her usual spotless SUV and sat there, engine running, as I crossed the drive and stood in plain view. "You're trying to ruin us," she said through her rolled-down window. "I am hosting legal events on my own land," I replied. "That's more than I can say for you. You're turning this community against itself." "No," I said. "You did that the moment you tried to steal what wasn't yours." She didn't respond, just rolled up the window and drove away, slowly, like she was trying to make a point. She didn't need to. By now, she had already lost control. But I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. People like Karen never are. It rained the next morning, a steady gray Oregon drizzle that soaked into the soil and made the air taste like iron and moss. I stood under the porch awning with a mug of black coffee, watching the runoff carve thin rivers through the gravel drive. Peaceful still. It lasted 12 minutes. Then I got the email, subject, community grievance and formal complaint against Mr. Andrew Calloway. Attached was a PDF, 6 pages long, on Wisteria Pines HOA letterhead. It accused me of everything from creating hazardous conditions for neighborhood children to operating an unlicensed commercial venue to, and I had to laugh, fomenting civil unrest by restricting communal access. They'd CC'd the county zoning, office, the Chamber of Commerce, and 3 local news outlets. I forwarded it to Mark with one sentence. "Game on." He called within the hour. "They're trying to paint you as a rogue operator. We need to counter publicly. No more quiet filings. Time to go nuclear." So, we did. That afternoon, Mark submitted a formal civil lawsuit to the Lane County Court, naming Wisteria Pines HOA as a corporate entity, along with Karen Westmore individually, plus 2 other board members who had signed off on the fake community corridor. Proposal. The charges were comprehensive: civil trespass, destruction of property, defamation, harassment, malicious interference with business, and willful misrepresentation of property rights. We attached the video evidence, the surveyor's certified maps, the digital trail of emails and flyers, and the cherry on top, a notarized statement from one of their own board members, anonymously, confirming that Karen had knowingly submitted false maps to the county. Mark said the judge was someone he knew well, not one to tolerate abuse of process. The same day, I got a call from Sarah McKee, a local reporter I'd met during a farm expo 2 years back. "Andrew," she said, "I just read the HOA's press blast. Something about it smells off. Mind if I come by and talk?" I said yes, and I gave her the whole story, not the PR spin, the real story. About how Karen used community trust as a weapon, about how the HOA believed my generosity was a sign of weakness, and how this wasn't just a local dispute, it was a warning. Sarah didn't just listen, she brought a camera crew. The piece aired that night. Local news, Channel 5, HOA dispute turns legal, property owner says enough is enough. They showed the drone footage of my land. They showed the signs, the flyers, my gates. Then a brief shot of Karen walking briskly to her car, refusing to comment. The story spread like a dropped match on dry hay. Within 2 days, my inbox was flooded. Local business owners, landowners, and even HOA members from other communities wrote to me, thanking me, telling me their own stories, offering support. A few even sent money, though I returned it. Then came the call from the county commissioner's office. They were opening an investigation, not just into the falsified corridor proposal, into Wisteria Pines as a whole, unlicensed use of land, lack of insurance for past events, potential zoning violations, possible misuse of HOA dues, and, most damning, potential fraud regarding official filings. Karen had lit a fire, and now it was burning her house down. By Friday morning, Wisteria Pines HOA was no longer just a homeowners association. It was front-page news. The local paper ran the headline, "Community Power or Property Piracy." Lane County launches full audit of controversial HOA. Under it, a photo of my fence with the No HOA Access sign prominently featured. I didn't celebrate, not yet, because I knew people like Karen don't surrender, they scheme. Sure enough, around noon, I got a certified letter shoved into my mailbox by someone who didn't even bother to close the gate afterward. It was thick, heavy, and smelled like desperation. Karen had filed for a temporary restraining order, not against me, but against any further events on my property. The claim that my recent event invitations posed an imminent threat to community order and increased vehicular danger for families with children adjacent to the shared boundary. I scanned the paperwork. It was padded with fabricated photos showing traffic buildup on roads from 2 years ago, stock images of kids on bikes, a petition signed by 8 residents, 3 of whom had already called me to apologize for being misled. But the motion had been filed, and there was a hearing set for Monday. Mark nearly laughed himself out of his chair. She just filed a restraining order on your land use rights. That's legally creative and completely idiotic. Still, we had to take it seriously. I spent the rest of the day working with Mark to prep our case, bringing in noise reports. There were none. Parking estimates, actual drone footage of the event setup, and a full safety plan we'd developed weeks ago, anticipating just this kind of stunt. But what Karen didn't know, and what I didn't fully realize until that evening, was just how sloppy her paper trail had become. Sarah, the reporter, called me again. We got a tip, an anonymous leak from someone on their board. What kind of tip? There's a second set of books. I nearly dropped the phone. Apparently, HOA dues were being routed, in part, into a special events account not disclosed in their financial reports. That account had paid out contractors under the table for event setups, sound systems, even catering. None of it was insured. None of it was permitted. And, most damning, some of the checks had been signed directly by Karen. Sarah promised she'd hold the story until we had confirmation, but it was more than just news at this point. It was potential evidence. Mark's eyes lit up when I told him, "We bring this to the hearing. If we can verify it, the judge won't just throw out their restraining order, he'll open the door for sanctions." That weekend, I barely slept. Not out of fear, out of fury. This wasn't about an HOA anymore. It was about abuse of trust, about how quickly a small group of people could weaponize bureaucracy, lies, and neighborhood politics for power. But they'd made a mistake. They picked a fight with someone who used to be a real estate attorney, someone who knew the rules better than they did, and someone with a damn good memory. The courthouse was quiet that Monday morning. Deceptively so, like the silence before a fuse reaches the powder. I wore a dark gray suit, pressed the night before, and carried a leather folder full of printouts, affidavits, and one very damning spreadsheet. Mark met me on the steps, grinning like he already knew the outcome. "Judge Brenner is presiding," he said. "He doesn't tolerate theatrics. Keep it crisp." Inside, the courtroom felt sterile, almost corporate. Karen sat across the aisle, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a young lawyer who looked like he was regretting his entire career path. Karen avoided eye contact, her mouth tight, hands clenched. For someone so used to controlling the narrative, she looked utterly out of her element. The hearing started with Karen's attorney rattling off the same baseless claims from their motion that my events were a public safety hazard, that I had violated an implied community easement, and that my vindictive behavior was damaging neighborhood cohesion. Judge Brenner raised one eyebrow and asked flatly, "Is the property in question part of the HOA's jurisdiction?" The attorney hesitated. "Technically, no, but then we'll be very precise about what this court can and cannot enforce." The judge interrupted. Mark stood, cool and surgical. He walked the judge through satellite images, surveys, and certified property lines. He played the drone footage from the last event, showing clean parking, orderly foot traffic, and ample signage. He presented signed statements from neighbors, including 2 who had signed Karen's earlier petition, but now retracted their names under oath. Then he brought out the big one. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the HOA is engaged in financial misconduct, including the use of a secondary undeclared bank account to fund unauthorized events on my client's land." He passed up the spreadsheet, itemized checks, vendor invoices, contractor emails, most of them with Karen's signature at the bottom. The courtroom fell into that frozen kind of silence you only hear in courtrooms and graveyards. Karen's lawyer muttered something about hearsay, but the judge cut him off. "I'll be referring this matter to the district attorney for review." Karen turned pale. The judge leaned back, visibly annoyed. "Restraining order denied. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary injunction against Wisteria Pines HOA from conducting any activity involving the plaintiff's property. This includes but is not limited to foot traffic, signage, marketing, or event planning. Violations will be treated as criminal trespass." He paused, and I strongly suggest the HOA consult an auditor. I didn't smile, not then. I just exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. But the fallout came fast. Within 48 hours, the DA's office announced an official fraud investigation into Wisteria Pines. Residents demanded a special session. Karen was suspended pending inquiry. One of the board members resigned immediately and issued a public apology, citing misplaced trust and poor oversight. By the end of the month, the HOA was hit with a civil penalty, $154,000 for damages and back use of my land. Another $47,000 in fines for regulatory violations. Karen pleaded guilty to filing false documents and received 2.5 years probation, along with 200 hours of court-ordered community service, ironically now posted outside the same civic center where she used to host her community days. As for me, I tore down the old field gate and built a tasting pavilion, put up a hand-carved cedar sign, private land, not for HOA use. Ever. The first weekend we opened, we sold out of every bottle of Pinot Noir before sunset. Funny how fast people show up when they know who really owns the land.